The capital of Eastern Byzantine Empire was Constantinople, the land the Ottomans ended up taking over around 1492 AD. So in Constantinople, just to explain to you guys, there were a group of people that were of Turkish descent that ended up in the Caucasus Mountains, and they were facing a political situation where they were battling against Islam coming from the south, and they were battling also against Christians coming from that would be the west of them. And they had a real big political decision to try to decide, separate, and distinguish themselves between the two. And the leader of Khazaria converted en masse all his people to Judaism as a political ploy in order to maintain positions of power. They ended up all converted to Judaism, and they stayed in that position. And eventually, Theodora of Khazar, which is one of the Khazarian leaders' daughters, she married Leo the Fifth, if I'm not mistaken, or it might have been Leo the Third, and they married into the Byzantine Empire. So this is the first time the Roman Catholic Church had a connection with what was considered Jews at the time, because Jewish are people that aren't Israelites, but they converted to Judaism. So they married into the Roman Catholic Church. If you look at people of Ashkenazi descent, you can look at their facial features and you can easily spot the fact that they have Turkic features within their look, within their face. They are the majority population of Jews in America currently at the moment, and they majorly control Israel as a whole, as they are the biggest population of Germans and Jews that are currently within Israel. Now they've spawned off, and the Mongolian Empire and the Russians ended up pushing the Khazarians away from where they were in Ukraine and above the Caucasus Mountains and pushed them further into Europe. And at that point, the Rus, they took over Ukraine, and they ended up forming an Orthodox Christian dynasty, which ended up being known as USSR later on down the line, and today they're known as modern-day Russia. And they were of Viking-like origin, the Rus, but they ended up forming what is the modern-day dynasty that has existed from Russia on back of Orthodox Christians. And the Mongolian Empire came in and they were warring, and they took over a lot of land, and they took over all the port routes that Khazaria controlled, because Khazarians controlled a lot of port routes as merchants, and they were forcing people to come and pay a toll in order to get access to the Silk Road and other parts of the Eastern world in order for trade and export.
Anyway, so we have here, there we go, better. We have a Khazarian empire that at one point went over, there we go, into the northern part of India. And we know this, that in spite of the formalities that said that the old Khazarian empire ended in this area here, we know it extended over as far as this boundary here, because there are persistent historical, not myths. They do have some aspects of legend, but they're inculcated into our expressions in all of our languages. So even in Chinese, so in China, there is this, the cultural work for the Chinese is called The Journey to the West. Really, it's a cool book. Jackie Chan's made several movies about the central characters in that book. All Westerners should read it if you want to understand the Chinese mind. It doesn't aid you understanding the CCP and those people, but it does aid you in understanding the cultural milieu in which China has arisen to the modern state here. Okay, but even in Journey to the West, there are aspects to this little story here. The Chinese had this phrase, this expression, that you had to watch out for the name stealers. We have that same expression arising from Europe in 800 AD. That was when it was written down in 800 AD. It was written down in Europe Watch out for the name stealers. Don't have anything to do with them. All of this kind of stuff. You're just going to get into trouble. And the name stealers here that are being referenced, and the name stealers referenced in China that goes back even further than that 800 AD. Now, this was written down in 800 AD. They may have had it for 1,000 years before that as part of the heritage in the Oralinda, the Codex Oralinda. This is where I'm referencing it, right? But it's written down in other areas, in other literature. I think even Chaucer wrote had a little bit of an allusion to it. But in any event, so it goes back some period of time. And these are the name stealers, okay? Because the Khazarians were this group. Now in China, they described it as if you go far enough west, you will run into these people that will invite you into their village as a traveler. They will feed you. You will have a nice drink. You have a great night. They put you in the best bed in the inn, and then they kill you. Okay? Then they kill you. They take all of your possessions and they steal your name. Now while you're having dinner with them and they're getting you drunk and stuff and they're drugging you up, they were known to really use drugs and be black magic kind of people, right? A lot of black magic is associated with the ability to know how certain drugs will affect the mind, et cetera, and you can introduce them into food. So mostly a lot of magic per se is dealing with drug states for the mind. In that aside, the Chinese had the understanding that if you went there, they would get your story. They would steal your name and your story. And so the Khazarians were known by the Chinese, and so, but it was known on both sides. So if you were over here and you were going to try and do business with the Chinese and you went through there, you might run into one of these groups of the Khazarians that would kill you after learning everything they could about you. They would steal your story, then they would go to China, pretend to be you, make the deal, and then go back, and the deal never happened. So they're fucking both sides, really. That was the thing, right? These were truly evil people. Now, both sides of the trade equation understood that there were nasty people, and in the Codex Oralinda they're described as being to the east, and the Chinese are describing them as being to the west. Aha! Anyway, so here we are in our current war.
أغلبنا لا يعرف بأن صعود النازية بين الحرب العالمية الأولى والثانية هو كان بدعم أمريكي. الكل يتساءل طيب كيف كان هناك انهيار ألماني وقيود أوروبية، كيف سمحوا للنازية بالصعود وتأسيس جيش؟ بالدعم الأمريكي، بالأموال الأمريكية، بالقروض، بالاستثمارات. 6 ملايين، لا يوجد أي دليل بأن هناك 6 ملايين يهودي قتلوا، وربما حصلت محارق لا أحد ينفيها، وهناك معسكرات اعتقال صحيح، ولكن الدليل على أن هذا الموضوع مسيس وليس إنساني ولا حقيقي. كيف نتحدث عن 6 ملايين ولا نتحدث عن 26 مليون سوفيتي قتلوا في تلك الحرب؟ يعني 6 ملايين أغلى. الممارسات نفسها كانت على كل الاتجاهات، لم يكن هناك طرق قتل مختصة باليهود ولا طريقة تعذيب مختصة باليهود. في كل الأماكن نفس الطريقة استخدمتها النازية، ولكن القضية هي قضية مسيسة ولتزوير الحقيقة ولاحقا للتمهيد لنقل اليهود من أوروبا باتجاه مناطق أخرى هي فلسطين. اليهود الذين أتوا إلى فلسطين هم يهود الخزر شرق قزوين، هم وثنيون وتبعوا الديانة اليهودية في القرن الثامن الميلادي، هاجروا إلى أوروبا وأتوا إلى هذه المنطقة. لا يوجد أي علاقة بينهم وبين شعب إسرائيل.
يوجد بحث لعالم روسي بالدي ان اي صدر العام أثبت بأن الإسرائيليين بالنسبة العظمى منهم أو أغلبهم لا يعودون إلى نبي الله إسحاق، وبالنهاية هم لا يعودون إلى يعقوب ولا ينتمون إلى إبراهيم من قريب ولا من بعيد. أساس الصهاينة الآن موجودين في فلسطين هي دولة الخزر التي كانت تقع جنوب روسيا. هذه الدولة كانت بها ديانة إسلامية وديانة مسيحية وديانة يهودية. أراد الملك أن يوحدهم، فالحبر اليهودي قام باغتيال الشيخ الإسلامي ولم يحضر للمناظرة، وعندما حضر رجل الدين المسيحي سأله هل تقر بموسى والتوراة؟ فأقر له وقال أنا لا أقر بالإنجيل وعيسى. ثم عممت الديانة اليهودية كديانة لهذه الدولة، ولأن اليهود لهم محرماتهم الداخلية، يعني هو يحرم السرقة من اليهودي والزنا باليهودي وأكل مال اليهودي ويبيح لغيره. وكانت دولة الخزر دولة أشبه بالمغول والتتر، وهي تقع شمال هذه المنطقة وعايشة على السلب والنهب. اعتنقوا الديانة اليهودية وجدوا أنها تنسجم مع سلوكهم وأطباعهم. ثم بعد أن قامت روسيا القيصرية بضم دولة الخزر إلى روسيا، تسللوا من دولة الخزر وذهبوا إلى أوروبا الشرقية ثم باقي أنحاء أوروبا، وعند التهجير جمعوهم وأتوا بهم إلى فلسطين، وثيودور اعتزل من دولة الخزر. وبالتالي اليهود الموجودين في فلسطين لا يشتركون معنا بالأب ولا يشتركون معنا بقيم السماء لأنهم صهاينة وليسوا يهود، ولا يوجد أي بيننا وبينهم أي رابط، بالإضافة إلى اعتداءهم على أراضينا واحتلال مقدساتنا. اليوم الشيعة هم يمثلون الإسلام المحمدي الأصيل الذي يحافظ على ثوابت الإسلام ويرفض التطبيع مع الصهاينة. أقولها بكل صراحة.
بينما الجهة الأخرى اليوم قابلة وراضخة لقضية التطبيع.
يعلم بأنه العقبة أمام الرضوخ وسير عمليات التطبيع، وكل الدول الغربية تعلم بأنه الشيعة هم العقبة أمام التطبيع ومصادرة حقوق المسلمين وحقوق الشعب الفلسطيني في أرضه. اليوم قدوم البابا للنجف الأشرف وتوسل الولايات المتحدة بالجمهورية الإسلامية من أجل أن تجلس للحوار معها ويعكس حالة الصمود وانتصار الشيعة، وأن كل أساليب الآخرين لم تجدي نفعا. حتى الجماعات الإرهابية التي أرسلوا العراق دفنها العراقيون في أراضيهم.
And this gets us to 100 AD and how the Khazarian nation grew. The way the Khazarian nation became the powerhouse that it became in history was because they took over the trade routes that came out of China. If you look at this map here, this is from 100 AD. This is about when it started. You have the Eastern Han Dynasty, and you have the Kush Empire and these empires in India that are spiced, and then you have the Chinese who are developing all kinds of silks and fabrics. And so you have caravans of families that will make all these spices and fabrics and so forth, and they'll load all their goods that they've been making for a few years onto their carts. And then they would begin this long journey from China all the way to Western Europe. Yes, all the way to Spain and the UK, or what became the UK, these Western empires just north of the Mediterranean. And to get there, though, look how you would have to travel directly over the Caspian and Black Sea. As these families were traveling from China and India and passing through this area of Khazaria, the Khazarian people, like a family, would find a traveling group and say, hey, we know you guys are really tired. You've been traveling for thousands of miles. We live here in this area, and we're happy to put you up for just a few dollars. We'll set you up. We'll get you a nice meal tonight, a good place to bed to sleep in. You'll feel a lot better in a couple days, and you can be on your way. And we're happy to do this. It's just part of our helping and being neighborly, okay? So the group, the family, would believe them, and they would follow them to their place, and that night they would make them a big meal. The Khazarians would make them a big meal, and they'd get them nice and full, and they would also get them drunk, and they would lace their food with plant hallucinogens because they had learned that technology, right? And so they would get these people in a mind state whereby they would tell their whole life story. They would tell where they're from. They would tell all the merchants that they deal with in China, all the family and everything about them, all the names, ages, and all that good stuff. And then after a night or two, they then would tie up all the family. And then the Khazarians would then torture them in front of the kids. They would first torture the father, and then they would torture the mother, and then they would torture the kids and kill them. And what they would do is they would carry out this same technology we now see happening of what they do to children to draw adrenaline out of them and to draw hallucinogenic properties out of their blood. And that's by convincing the child or convincing the victim that they're going to die. So the initial part of the ritual, a part of the torture, is just simply physical attack. You just are physically doing torturous proceedings to the body so that the person is filled with adrenaline. And then after that, you then convince, as the abuser, you then convince that victim that they're going to die. And so they no longer are in this mindset of being focused on the adrenal portion. They're now moving into this depressive portion, which is they're believing and knowing that they're about to die. And this releases a whole different set of chemicals into the blood. So you have not only the adrenal flowing through the blood, but you also have these other hallucinogenic properties of chemicals flowing through the blood, so that when the victim then, their blood is drained and drank, you get both the adrenaline effect as well as the hallucinogenic effect. And this is all technology, this is all torturing, human torturing and manipulating technology that has been passed down by these sick groups. And I heard this story from and then after they had killed the family and drank their blood and ate their meat and all of that, they would obviously they would take all their goods, and then they would travel to where they had described that they were going. So the Khazarians would then take all this information they had got from them after they had gotten them drunk and filled with hallucinogenic medicines. They take that information, they take all their goods, and they would sell them to posing as that family, posing with the names and everything of that family. So the folks in the West thought it was the same folks they had been communicating all this time that were in China. And so this is how they would put on disguises. The Khazarian mafia became very adept at putting on disguises and taking on a different role and a new name. And by doing that, you could then coerce even more people by posing that you're this helpful, caring individual, but really you're this sadistic murderer. And folks have no idea that you're the serial killer because you're so adept at putting on all these different costumes. And what do we see here in Dylan Monroe's map that he gave? Costumes. These groups have just simply been wearing costumes just like the ancient Khazarians did in Khazaria. They simply put on a costume of these, in this case, this helpful group that would help this family. And nowadays you have a government that poses as this helpful government, or a medical institution that poses as this helpful institution, or this religious group that poses as this helpful institution. And on the outside, and the mirage is that they're this helpful, human-oriented, compassionate, love-centered group that is there to totally help society, and we are the ones, are the caregivers, and we're going to help everybody. But behind that curtain is this sadistic murderer. And that's what we see in our governments now. That's what we see in the medical systems. Look at the medicine they use to treat people. They poison people to quote-unquote heal them. And it's the same thing with religion. They get people to believe certain characteristics about themselves, which poisons them. And then they offer them the only solution, which is the religious belief system. And it's the same with medicine. You pose this disease that they're going to get, and then you pose the only solution, which is this particular elixir that you inject. And it's the same thing with government. They pose as this helpful group, and after we have this war, you're going to have this peaceful society. It's going to be awesome because we're like this helpful society. When really all the government is doing is instigating war, as much as the medical institution is instigating disease, and as much as the spiritual institutions, the religious institutions, are instigating a degraded view of oneself, a compromised view of one's creative force, you see? And it's the same pattern of deception as what was going on with Esau and Jacob, as what was going on with the Khazarians and these people that traveled through, and as what was going on with Kurt Barker and his involvement with CP and the Luciferians that were talking to him. All these people are doing the same thing, posing as kind, humanitarian people, but they're vicious murderers. They're the exact antithesis of what they claim to be. And this is how you know this is the situation now that we've been in for over 10,000 years, is because it's the same patterns. It's the same patterns of harm. It's the same patterns of destruction that have been permeating our society since the very beginning. And this technology is what they used to harness all the money, harness all the power. And you're about to hear that story with this accounting that these two scholars have done for us. They have written the story. The gentlemen are, I mentioned them earlier, Preston James and Mike Harris, who wrote this essay called The Hidden History of the Incredibly Evil Khazarian Mafia. And it basically is going to walk you through 100 AD to modern time, and is going to show exactly how they not only infiltrated the West, but they infiltrated all of the ruling families. They infiltrated all of the money. They infiltrated all of the religions. They infiltrated all of the medicine. I mean, heck, even in 1913, you have Rockefeller establish the American Cancer Society to shut down naturopathy. One of the first prerogatives, desires, and he even said it, one of the first things he wanted to do was to get rid of this quote-unquote witchcraft, which is what they wanted to do, to move people away from using plant medicines to heal people, to moving to using oil-based, pharma, petrol-based chemicals to quote-unquote heal the body, which is an adulteration, which is a blasphemy against nature. Here Rockefeller is posing as this humanitarian, this person who wants to raise money to heal people, whereas the whole thing is a Ponzi scheme.
Around the same time that John D. Rockefeller seized U.S. media, he also hijacked U.S. medicine. When it was discovered that drugs could be produced from petroleum, America's top oil mogul ordered his army of propagandists to invert reality accordingly. Medicines used for thousands of years were suddenly classified as alternative, while the new, petroleum-based, highly addictive, and patentable drugs were declared the gold standard. After buying a German pharmaceutical company that manufactured chemicals of war for Adolf Hitler, Rockefeller leveraged his political influence by pressing Congress to declare natural healing modalities unscientific quackery. Rockefeller then took control of the American Medical Association and began offering massive grants to top medical schools under the mandate that only his approved curriculum be taught. Any mention of the healing powers of herbs, plants, and diet was erased from most medical textbooks. Doctors and professors who objected to Rockefeller's plan were crucified by the media, removed from the AMA, and stripped of their license to teach and practice medicine. Those who dared to speak out were arrested and jailed. When evidence began to emerge that petroleum-based medicines were causing cancer, Mr. Rockefeller founded the American Cancer Society, through which he suppressed that information. John D. Rockefeller is duly credited as the founder of the pharmaceutical industry, and the reason that medical error is currently the third leading cause of death in America. This is not an indictment against doctors. More than anyone, they are under the stranglehold of the single largest lobbying power in Washington. Every year, the pharmaceutical industry spends at least twice the amount as big oil to influence laws, policies, and public perception. Thanks to Mr. Rockefeller, the architect of American monopolies, no industry has more power over our lives than Big Pharma.
I don't believe that the Jewish state and modern Zionism would have been possible without Christian Zionism. Christian Zionism. Christian Zionism. The Jewish state and modern Zionism would have been possible without Christian Zionism. I think that the many Christian supporters of the rebirth of the Jewish state and the ingathering of the Jewish people in the 19th century made possible the rise of Jewish Zionism.
Were I a Jew, I would be a Zionist. My father pointed out to me I did not need to be a Jew to be a Zionist. For I am. Israel is essential to the security of Jews worldwide.
I have said to people when they ask me if this capital crumbled to the ground, the one thing that would remain is our commitment to our aid, and I don't even call it aid, our cooperation with Israel, because that's fundamental.
I'm delighted to present my latest book, In Defense of Israel. This book will expose the sins of the fathers and the vicious abuse of the Jewish people. In Defense of Israel will shake Christian theology. It scripturally proves that the Jewish people as a whole did not reject Jesus as Messiah. It will also prove that Jesus did not come to earth to be the Messiah. It will prove that there was a Calvary conspiracy between Rome, the high priest, and Herod to execute Jesus as an insurrectionist too dangerous to live. Since Jesus refused by word and deed to claim to be the Messiah, how can the Jews be blamed for rejecting what was never offered? Read it in this shocking expose in Defense of Israel.
A strange and mysterious preference for sexual relations in public rather than private, that people would have sexual intercourse in public like donkeys, he said. That's coming. A strange and mysterious fascination with having sexual relations in a motor car parked in a park, so people passing by can take a look. It's happening already. And it's coming from one direction. It's coming from those who liberated Jerusalem and then brought Banu Israel back to Jerusalem, to the Holy Land, who presided over the creation of the State of Israel, and who have protected Israel until Israel could grow to become a superpower and be poised to take over the rule over the world. Those who today rule the world are a mysterious dual alliance. Dual. It is a mysterious Jewish-Christian alliance which has emerged in Europe and which has spread its tentacles around the world. They are the ones who are bringing the Chabbath to such an extent that it is now almost prevailing in the world. And so as we see the filth spreading, we know that the moment is at hand for the destruction of the Arabs. Wailul lil Arab. When the destruction of the Arabs takes place, the critics of this book would be silenced. But I want to take you now back to that spot in the Caucasus Mountains, because we want to fine-tune our attempt to identify Gog and Magog. It is not sufficient to say that Gog and Magog are the European Christians and European Jews. No. Because amongst the European Christians and European Jews, there will be those who become Muslims, there will be those who are our friends and allies. Do not make the mistake of declaring of all Jews that they are your enemies, and all Christians, they are your enemies. That will be quite foolish. An American woman went to Israel and stood up in front of an Israeli bulldozer to protect a Palestinian home. And the bulldozer ran over her. The media, of course, buried it. Can you say of that woman that she is your enemy? Could you say of that woman that she is Gog and Magog? But she is white, and she is American. So we would have peanuts in our heads if we make a blanket statement, all white people, or all Americans, or all Christians, or all Jews. Not at all. Don't fall in that trap. Let's fine-tune to try to locate Gog and Magog. We have to go to the Caucasus Mountains. And there at the Caucasus Mountains we have to look for a people with power. They have to be a people whose power was greater than any other power in the world at that time. We have to look for a people who will eventually be moving from that northern area and moving towards Jerusalem. Shortly after the death of the Prophet ﷺ, something very mysterious happened in that part of the world that historians have chosen to bury. A tribe called the Khazar chose to embrace Judaism. And so the world witnessed for the first time the very strange phenomenon of a non-Semitic people becoming Jews. Non-Semitic becoming Jews. The genetic research is available on the internet. Anyone can study it. You had conferences, medical conferences, which were organized to study these people, their genetic composition. They had a genetic composition which was unique in all of mankind. No people in the world were like them. This is scientific research. And these people, the Khazar, chose to convert to Judaism, but they did so not for any religious reasons. They were not so much interested in the Kitab and to follow the law. They embraced Judaism for purposes of political expediency. They were sandwiched between Islam and Christianity, Byzantine Christianity, and they chose Judaism. These European Jews who have no racial, biological connection with the Banu Israel multiplied. وَهُمْ مِنْ كُلِّ حَدَبٍ يَنْسِلُونَ Nasl, they multiplied and breeded to such an extent that today 9 in every 10 Jews in the world, 90% or more, are European Jews. They outnumber the Semitic Jews by 9 to 1 or 10 to 1. These European Jews, if you look at the list of names of Nobel Prizes for science, for literature, would you name it? You will find that these are people who far exceed the rest of mankind in their intellectual brilliance, in their academic achievements, in their scientific research. They are a people different from the rest of mankind. And then you find that these Khazar who became Jews also chose to become Christians. So you have the Khazar infiltrating the camp of Judaism and infiltrating the camp of Christianity as well. And from the ranks of these Khazar Jews and Khazar Christians, the emergence of the Jewish-Christian alliance can be traced. It is this Jewish-Christian alliance, Khazar, which eventually gives birth to the Zionist movement. The Zionist movement has absolutely nothing to do with Banu Israel. It is an essentially and an exclusively European achievement. It is these Khazar who, having become Jews, first Jews and secondary Christians, who built an empire that was the most powerful in Europe and Central Asia. And when the armies of Islam had simultaneously defeated the two superpowers in the world, the Persian Empire and Byzantium, and had emerged as the most powerful military force in the world, Khazar blocked our way. We could not defeat them. And so it would be quite correct to say that the Khazar demonstrated a military power without equal in the world at that time. It is from this part of the world that they spread out. They spread out to Eastern Europe, they spread to Russia, and eventually crossed the sea to the United States. And they are at the heart of the revolutions which transformed Europe from Christendom into modern Western civilization. They are at the heart of the Bolshevik Revolution in Russia, which overturned Christianity in Russia. They are at the heart of the French Revolution, in consequence of which the back of the Christian church is broken. The prohibition of riba is now consigned to the garbage bin. And they are at the heart of the creation of the Zionist movement. It is these Khazar, Jewish and Christian, who now move to the Holy Land, assisted by a strange and mysterious Jewish Holocaust. And the history of that will one day be revealed on Judgment Day. How much was their input into the Holocaust? So that you have an exodus now of these European Jews to the Holy Land. When the state of Israel comes into being, who it is who controls power in Israel? Not the Oriental Jews, the darker-skinned Jews. No, they are second-class citizens. The ones who control power in Israel are the European Jews.
Hey guys, if you want to watch more clips, click here.
And if you want to watch the full podcast, click right here.